Hello, it's been a while. Welcome back to my second channel, Angel Vlogs 2. I wanted to share with you a couple of books that I think are gonna be perfect for getting lost in this winter because that is what I'm planning to do after this little busy season that I've had. Is I'm just planning to get so much rest in this winter and cozy up with a candle and a hot drink and with some really good books. I actually own every single one of these books in their physical form, but for some reason I can only find one of them today, which is very sad. I wanted to show you the physical covers of all the books, but I'll definitely put the covers on screen so you know what they look like. But I guess let's go ahead and start with this one. The first book that I think is a great winter read, partially because she's kind of thick, partially because, I don't know, I just feel like stories like this are meant for the colder season, but it's Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This is an emotional roller coaster ride. It talks about a Korean family through 3 generations of them surviving the war, surviving the attack from Japan, the invasion from Japan, and just really trying to figure out their life out amongst the violence. It starts with Sunya, who lives in a little fisherman's village and lives a very peaceful life until one day she falls in love with a man, go figures, and ends up having his child. And from there, the course of her life changes entirely and kind of gets flipped upside down. So she now has to learn how to be an adult, how to care for a child, how to care for a family, a husband, and how to do all of that away from home and away from her parents. That is really such a small portion of the book. I mean, it's a very important portion of the book, but it is such a small portion of the story, and you really get to meet her husband, her children, and then sooner or later their children as well. And you see how this family pushes on into the modern world and does everything they can to protect them and their family members. This book is heartbreaking, it's harrowing, it's just emotional. It really just, that's the best way I can describe it. But it's also so hopeful and so beautiful and very honest and raw. I enjoyed every single page of this book. I loved every character of this book in their own way. There wasn't a single filler section or filler character. I felt everything was just perfect, and yeah, this was a 5-star for me, as you can probably tell. But Pachinko definitely holds a special place in my heart, especially as a cozy winter read. The next book that I got was actually one that I got sent as a part of my Aardvark subscription. I've been really enjoying Aardvark and just being able to pick out new books every month. Does it help my TBR? No, not really, but I have been discovering a lot of books on there that I probably wouldn't have discovered if it wasn't for Aardvark. So honestly, I think book subscriptions are great. The book is Where I End by Sophie White. This, trigger warning, first of all, it has body horror, abuse, violent thoughts. It has a lot of aspects that make it very uncomfortable, but I think that's also why it was such a quick and fast read. It gives me the feeling of an A24 film, something like A Midsummer, where it's so twisted, but in very subtle, very slow burn ways. And it's everything seems kind of okay, and then as it builds, you're wait, something just feels off, and then it all comes ahead and you're okay, this is grotesque. But the story talks about the main character. I'm not going to try to pronounce her name because I don't think I'm going to pronounce it right, but she lives on a little island of Ireland, I believe, and she lives there with her grandma and her mom, who is in some sort of a vegetative comatose state. And she refers to her mom as the bed thing because her and her grandma has to work day and night to take care of her mother. She is not able to do anything on her own, so they have to feed her, they have to change her, they have to bathe her, they have to shift her body around so she doesn't get bed sores. And right away you kind of do understand that there is this level of curiosity but also spite that she feels towards her mother. Understandably, I mean, she has lived her whole life, pretty much, as long as her memory serves her at least, serving and caring for her mother. And there's something kind of sinister and weird going on in the background where you're getting snippets of there is this myth about the island. People really don't like her and her grandma, and she can't figure out why. So you have that mystery to like slowly untangle as the story goes on. One day, she is left to her own vices, and she ends up meeting this artist who is from the mainland, who has come to the island to like do some arts stuff for the museum there. And she essentially just like falls into infatuation with this woman, except that the woman also has a baby, and she develops this weird interest for the baby as well. From there, things start moving, okay? Her obsession with figuring out the truth about the island, about her mother, about herself grows, and those things kind of happen in parallel with each other, but also serve as connections with each other. And it's one of those stories where everything comes to head at the same time, and you get this insane climax of the book that is like, it was mind-blowing, honestly. But yeah, it was really an interesting one. It's definitely a slow burn. It's very grotesque, very visual, I would say. So just be warned about the trigger warnings, but it ended up being a really fun read for me. It was I read it at probably the perfect time because I was just entering a reading slump, and I hadn't really read anything that like had me at the edge of my seat for a little while. So having this as like a little re-entry back into reading was perfect because it was definitely a page turner. It was very, very intense, and I think I do have an affinity for these types of books where you do get the horror and you get the thriller and you get the mystery because they're just fun to read. After that, I have a very, very short read. I believe this is like under 200 pages maybe, but it's Slow Days, Fast Company by Eve Babbitt. This is the first Eve Babbitt's book that I've ever read, and I fell in love with her writing. She, to me, can be grouped with like the Dolly Aldertons of the world, the Joan Didions of the world. She's like a girl's girl writer. She writes about the female existence, and in her case specifically, she writes about her life in like glamorous Los Angeles when drugs were still a thing, parties were wild, and you just get little snippets of like that beautiful Hollywood dream. She isn't quite like an A-list celebrity at that time. She really is just somebody who has like a foot in the door in the entertainment industry, but just hearing her stories about the people that she knows, about her dating life, about LA at that time was such a fun read. And her writing really does feel like you're just chatting with a girlfriend over drinks. You're just having a little catch up. It's very like, has the tone of we love men, but also smash the patriarchy, but also I can't stand men, but also I can't live without them. And I'm sure a lot of us have gone through similar feelings in our lives. It's just a fun read. She feels like she's a part of your girl gang. It's light, it's easy. What also made this book so fun for me though is at the beginning of the book, she prefaces that she actually wrote this book for a man that she was pining for. And so in between each of the short stories, you get a little italicized note from her to this man. And because you get these little notes, it's like a little reminder that like, hey, read this, but like read this from the eyes of this man and know that I'm putting a little extra like spice and fun into it, maybe to make him jealous, maybe to catch his attention. And I thought that was just such a interesting way to like tie everything together, that you have this larger backstory of what's like going on in her life. I loved it. I loved it. Every once in a while, I do really crave like a comforting girl's girl read, and she is definitely on that list for me now, and I can't wait to read some of her other writing. Now, entering the world of romantasy for a little bit, I actually haven't read any romantasy or even fantasy in quite some time. I stopped in the middle or like near the end of the Throne of Glass series. It was just a little too long for me, and it definitely lost me a little near the end. I think I have one book left, so I might as well finish it. But I did read Assassin's Blade recently, which is the novella that fits into the like beginning portion of the Throne of Glass series. I honestly wasn't gonna read the novella, but my younger sister got into Throne of Glass and said that it's a must read, so I read it based on her recommendation and loved it, like absolutely loved it. I really like when novellas are done right, like the novella from a series, because it gives you a taste into the lore, into the universe that that series is built around without having to dive into like a full 5-book series or 6-book series. And I think Assassin's Blade was done really well. You really get a fun snippet into Kalina's life and some of the friendships, relationships, romance, history of her character, but it does make for a great standalone book as well. Essentially, what Throne of Glass is about is Selena, it is one of the world's most renowned assassins at a very young age and as a woman, which is unheard of, but a lot of people are terrified of her, and she really has built quite a name for herself. But underneath this terrifying image of the world's best assassin, she's a girl. She is, you know, learning about herself. She is unlearning some of the trauma that she's experienced. She's discovering her history. And you get to follow her through war, through romance, through friendships, through more fighting and war, through extremely badass situations. And that's kind of what the Throne of Glass series is about. In Assassin's Blade, you get a taste of all of that. The romance, the friendship, the fighting, the badassness of her, and a little bit of the lore, but all condensed into a really solid novella. It takes you through an emotional roller coaster ride. It makes you want to read more. So that's why I think the novella was done well. I personally really loved it. Whether or not you are planning to read the Throne of Glass series, I think the novella is worth checking out. But yeah, Assassin's Blade, I think is a great entry point if you want to dip your toe into the world of like romantasy, fantasy. I think it's actually clear that I like mysteries in the fall winter time. There's just something about a good mystery or thriller that works for me when the weather starts to get cold. But the next two recommendations I have are both in those categories. The first is Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. This was another freaky deaky thriller type mystery book. It talks about the main character who is a piano prodigy, and she grew up as an Asian American, really struggling with her identity as a lot of us do. Her parents never fully kind of integrated into the culture in America, so she's always felt like she's had one foot in, one foot out, trying to navigate what and who she really is. At a very young age, she developed a strong love for piano, probably because her parents both love piano and both teach piano, and she gets discovered online really quickly. Because of the virality of the videos of her playing piano that were posted when she was a kid, she gets a full ride to a piano or like music conservatory in, I believe it's New York City. I read this a while ago, but I'm pretty sure it's New York City. So she goes to school there and quickly discovers that more than just not being Caucasian and not fitting in that way, there are a lot of really wealthy people who go to this school, and that's another way that she really feels like she doesn't fit in. Something happens in her life that kind of prevents her from continuing her education at the conservatory, so she ends up coming out of the school and just working odd jobs to make ends meet. One day, a lady walks into her day job and like recognizes her as a piano prodigy that was in this conservatory and as the like little lady who blew up on YouTube with her piano playing, and offers her a job at this beauty clinic, like elite beauty clinic in the city. And of course she says yes. It's an amazing opportunity. She would have never gotten this opportunity if it wasn't for this serendipitous meeting. However, she quickly learns that there is a very dark and sinister background to the entire beauty industry, specifically in relation to this company, and goes crazy from there. Some really twisted things happen. The story builds and builds and builds, and yeah, you get to find out when you read it. But this was a good one for me because I got the relatability of the, you know, being an immigrant, being an Asian American, of not feeling like you fit in, and also of that idea and question of like, how much are you willing to do to fit in? This was actually quite a short read as well, so it's a great one if you are in a reading slump and you need something quick and easy to pick you back into it. Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. The last book on my list was actually also sent to me as book mail, but it is The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I've read his other two books, The Maidens, Silent Patient, and this is actually the third and last book in this world that he's built where there's a lot of like Greek mythology tied in. The Fury is a whodunit mystery, and it's told from the perspective of Elliot, who definitely is a bit of an unreliable narrator, or so you think, but it essentially talks about a movie star, Lana, who invites a bunch of her friends to a Greek island that her husband owns for the weekend. And lo and behold, a gun goes off one night and somebody dies. So through Elliot's eyes, you get to see what happens before the island, what all of the relationships between the guests were like, what Lana's relationship to them were, what was going on in her life. And of course, you get to see the chaos that ensues on the island after one of the guests are murdered. I thought this was such a fun read. It was engaging, it was exciting. I definitely did not like Elliot as a character, but I do think that having the story being told through his eyes was a good play, because you get that sinister sort of like unreliable narrator spin to it, and it makes you always question, like, can I even trust this guy? Like, can I trust the story from his eyes? So I think having that unreliable narrator always puts a fun spin to the story. I would say of the three Alex Michaelides books, The Maidens is still my favorite, but The Fury definitely comes in close second, and I've talked about The Maidens before on this channel, so I wanted to recommend The Fury because it does follow more of a classic whodunit structure. You have the island, you have this vacation, and they can't leave the island, and they have to figure out who is the murderer. I think that all of his books has that whodunit sort of plot line, but this one definitely follows the most classic whodunit plotline, and it's also always fun seeing how authors put a spin on this very classic story. Again, a super fast read for me. I believe I finished it in maybe 2 days. I definitely could do this in one sitting, however, I just haven't been able to like dedicate that much time to finish a book in one sitting, so I did finish this in 2 days. I absolutely loved it for the colder weather, and I think that you will as well. Okay, those are some of my recent faves that I think are great books to get lost in this winter. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts about them were, and also if you have any recommendations for me. I am always looking for a new book to read. I do have a lot of books on my TBR, but I don't know, there's something about getting a recommendation from another human that feels way more fulfilling than just like picking a book at random. So please, please, please do let me know if you have any recs that you think that I will like. I'm currently also working on a reading vlog for this channel, so I'm excited to post that as well, so stay tuned for that one. But that's it. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!